Um, you know, talking about the Pac-12 and USC, we can talk about some, best wide receivers in the nation. Jordan Addison certainly being one of them.
Guy's a beast.
Yeah, I mean, look, the guy puts up tons of numbers with Kenny Pickett at Pitt last year,
Right.
comes over to USC. All these rumors about how things aren't going well. Supposedly he wasn't getting everything he was supposed to be getting, but
Hmm.
he's coming in and he's still putting up numbers
Yeah, and he's producing.
and he's producing. But then you look over at Ohio State, they lose two wide receivers in the first round in the draft, in Olave and Garrett Wilson.
Right.
They produced another one in Jameson Williams, who was at Alabama last year after he portaled out, and he goes in the first round. You have Jackson Smith and Jigba last year, who dominates, probably puts up better numbers than all of
Then
them,
all of them, right? And then
and he comes
he's
in this year and he's off to not a great start because of the injuries.
yeah, the injuries are holding them back.
But Ohio State's wide receivers, I mean, outside of that slow start that they got in that Notre Dame game, now
They're
you look at the
just
stats
going
now,
crazy.
insane.
Marvin
Marvin
Harrison
Harrison
is
is out.
is just
Yeah, athletic freak. He's doing it all.
right.
Mecca Ibuka is really doing it all.
I was surprised because he actually picked up the slack when Jackson Smith and Jigma came out because
Mhm.
that injury was pretty detrimental because in the Notre Dame game it was like they couldn't get going with that.
Yeah, they didn't have the
And then
chemistry.
he
They didn't
picked
know how to
up
sync. Yeah.
and he held his own and it's like that's I think what's great about Ohio State and their receiving group is that these receivers they just step up and it's like you don't really see that often in college football. I mean, you do with bigger programs, but even then, like sometimes it just takes time.
Look, I
But
mean, Ohio State's wide receivers. I mean, I don't even know which case you would like to make, but between this year, if you we just talk about this year,
right,
an insane group of wide receivers. I
yeah,
mean, we talked about Egbuka and Harrison. Julian Fleming, who's been there, is also dominating.
right,
And we're not even gonna talk about the tight ends and the running backs stepping up as well. But
yeah, their running
just
backs are
just those
stellar.
three guys alone, we're not even and that's not even going into depth where they have other guys that are going to pop, other recruits already committed that could step in and do the same type of things in the future.
Right.
You combine that with what their room was like last year. I mean, you got to look at last year's roster in 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I
Right.
think you're gonna look at that roster of wide
See a
receivers,
few Pro
and they're
Bowlers.
all gonna be in the NFL, and a bunch of them are gonna be Pro Bowlers. It's gonna be
Yeah.
insane. We're gonna look back and say that might have been the greatest wide receiver room assembled in history in
Right.
any team ever. You know what I
You
mean?
know, you know what's interesting too is like each receiver is great in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Chris Olave, I mean, you can see what he's doing on the Saints. Like he's but it's like each receiver has different strengths. And it's not like every receiver that comes out is gonna be like a Julio Jones or whatever the case may be. But it's like even Garrett Wilson, he's making his way in New York. The Jets they have a reliable receiver in him. And just in general, I mean Marvin Harrison, like Junior, in this case with Ohio State. And it's just I don't know, man. Ohio State they have a knack for their receivers, and it's great to see because it helps out the whole narrative with Ohio State quarterbacks. Like back to back years, we've had great quarterback play with C.J. Stroud, with Justin Fields. Even before Justin Fields, we've had great quarterback play. So it's like they're finally getting more opportunity and more recognition. And again, these receivers, they're just great. And we should get a little bit more into Jordan Addison. What are your thoughts on him and as far as like his skill set? Like who do you really see him similar to in the NFL really? Like now or maybe even in the past?
It's tough to say. I mean, look, some of these wide receivers are speed guys, some of them are possession guys, some guys are more red zone targets, but we're starting to see now more of the mold of, you know, um, I guess you could go as far back as like Stephon Diggs, and then you get to now the Jamar Chases, the Justin Jeffersons in the
Right.
NFL. These guys can do it all.
Yeah.
Jordan Addison clearly is that kind
He
of
can
guy.
do it all.
He
Yeah,
can
for sure.
he can do it all. You could have him. You could line him up anywhere. You could have him run whatever route. You could put him against whatever coverage.
Right.
He knows how to find the holes in the defense, and if he has the chemistry with his quarterback, they're going to
How
take
to attack
advantage.
zones and
Yeah, and so, but what made me think of this, or not even think of this, but what I was seeing throughout the week was something that was interesting, and that was people were listing Jordan Addison's stats this year and how he's supposedly the best wide receiver in the
in the
country,
class. Yeah.
and then listing the stats of the three Ohio State receivers this year, and all three, Ucla, Harrison, Fleming, right on par with Jordan
Yeah,
Addison,
exactly.
which tells you one how good Ohio State's receivers are stacked, but also how good their offense is. So
Yeah,
just
their
to
offense is
even be
stellar.
able to feed those guys to put up those numbers
It's
is
crazy.
yeah, it's crazy. It's impressive. It's yeah, it's something to see.
Yeah. So I mean, with what I mean from what I see with Jordan Addison, just in general, I mean, we saw kind of like flashes of it last year when he was with Pitt, when he obviously Kenny Pickett was his numbers were great because he had such a reliable receiver. But it's kind of hard to tell, like, all right, maybe like once he transferred to SC, it's like, okay, will he carry over? Will he do? And it's like, regardless of his receptions or whatever the case is, his route running is clean. His route running is you know, he kind of reminds me of like a just like you said, like a Stephon Diggs or even like a Calvin Ridley when Calvin Ridley was on Bama.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much when he was on Atlanta. I don't think we got to really see how his potential could pan out, and obviously with his situation this year. But um, with just like you said, like he has that capability to do it all, and I think we're starting to see that more in the NFL. And Stephon Diggs, I feel like he was the start of that. Like before Stephon Diggs, I mean, we've had
The
okay,
different types,
yeah,
right?
the
We had
different
the
the
Odells, and
types,
then the
right?
Mike Evans, and then the Julio Jones,
Yeah,
and they
exactly.
all very different
And
kind
it's
of wide
like
receivers. Yeah.
he kind of submerged into like his own prototype where it's like he could do it all. He could be a possession guy, he could be a speed guy, he's a red zone target, whatever the case is. But I really like Jordan Addison. I don't know if he's the best receiver in the draft. I think it's left to be said with all the with Ohio State's
Well, look,
receivers.
we'll
So
say this. We haven't really even been talking about Jackson Smith and Jigba that much, just because of
yeah,
his injuries. What that guy did last year was insane and incredible. Um, those guys are probably they're 1 and 2 in the
yeah,
draft. If we're talking about the draft, but in the country, it gets tougher because now you have to include Marvin Harrison and
yeah. Now
Meke
you
Igbokwe.
and the season's nowhere near done yet.
Yeah,
So
and they're not even in the same draft class because those guys are still going to be around next year,
yeah.
which is
And
insane.